Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Warrington Borough Council's Cabinet on the 8th of March 2021. I'm joined tonight by Cabinet colleagues and also senior officers of the Council. There's myself, Councillor Russ Bowden, Leader of the Council, Councillors Mitchell, Guthrie, Higgins, Jennings, McLaughlin, Mundry, Patel and Smith. I'm joined by Stephen Broomhead, Chief Executive of the Council, as well as other senior officers, Matthew Cumberbatch, Linton Green, David Boyer, Tara Raj and Paula Worthington. I can confirm that all participants have received their agenda pack containing all the papers and tonight's business. We have a part 1 meeting which is open to the public and will be broadcast live on the Council's website. Items which are in part 2 are confidential and they won't be open to the public, and that's the point at which our broadcast will cease. Members have also received an update to the forward plan, which is item 3 on our agenda. So I'll now press on with tonight's agenda. First item is code of conduct, and obviously to remain all members that they must declare an interest in any item no later than when that is discussed on the agenda. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of February. Are we happy to agree those are true record, please, colleagues?
Aye.
Agreed, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, Cabinet Decisions Forward Plan. You've got a copy in your agenda pack, excuse me, and you've received a minor update in your papers for tonight's meeting. I think everything's fairly straightforward. Are colleagues happy with the forward plan?
Yeah, happy with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Agree.
Okay then, moving on to tonight's business then. Our first report is the performance report for quarter 3 of 2020/21. Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues will recall that we do have a corporate strategy for the period 2020 to 24, and that we have 4 main pledges to keep our residents healthy, happy and independent and living independently, to ensure that everyone benefits from a thriving economy, to ensure that communities are safe, strong and that our most vulnerable are protected, and to ensure that our town is clean, green and vibrant. Every quarter we report on how we're performing to the corporate strategy, and it's quite a long report, but I just want to pull out some real key positives. Under our pledge to ensure that residents live healthy, happy and independent lives, you'll see some really positive news about the work we're doing to create cycle routes within the borough. The route between Omega and Burton Wood Cycleway is now virtually complete, and there's further schemes, for example on Chester Road, from Gainsborough Road to Bridge Street, which was recently approved. That's ongoing as well. And I think that really shows that we are trying to encourage people to move away from cars and onto, as it were, more environmentally friendly ways of travelling around the borough and making it as safe as possible. I'm also pleased that we've managed to secure additional funding to purchase more accommodation for people with a disability and mental health. You know, some people who are very, very vulnerable require specialist accommodation, which requires us to buy bungalows and the sort, and then adapt it for their needs. I don't think sometimes the public realise just how much the council has to invest in protecting our most vulnerable, but that's exactly what the council is there to do. It's part of our statutory duties. And also under that other priority, I'd also like to highlight the work we're doing under the Kickstart programme. Kickstart is a programme whereby 16 to 24-year-olds can get 6 months worth of paid work experience with an employer, and we are one of the few gateway organisations in the town. So not only can we offer places for 16 to 24-year-olds who are, you know, at risk of long-term unemployment, but we can also work with other employers who are and try to encourage them to give an opportunity for some of our younger residents. There's some really positive work going on in the Central 6 with regard to placemaking projects that they've got going on. My colleague Councillor Tony Higgins, who is a lead member for that agenda, will expand on that in a bit. So I don't want to go into that. I'll let Tony pick up on that. In terms of our pledge to ensure everyone benefits from a thriving economy, I mean, it's been really difficult during COVID. There's no doubt that not only has COVID as a pandemic affected the economy, I think it's fair to say that the government's handling of COVID hasn't really helped. I think some of our figures, the unemployment figures, have been massaged by the furlough scheme and the like, but there are some systemic problems with the economy that have been caused by, I suppose, late action by the government. You know, locking down later than what was recommended by the scientists, etc. But despite that, in Warrington, I think we're doing better than could be expected, and full credit has to go to our officers and also the vision of the administration, because we've got a multi-sector strategy for economic growth in the borough, and some of our more successful sites are in the logistics industry, and those have done particularly well. Well, I say so particularly well. They've survived particularly well during COVID, and there's a new scheme to repurpose a former Asda distribution site, which will create 100 jobs in the borough, and that's really welcome news. As well as working with employers to grow the economy, we also recognise that there are a lot of people who are going to be facing unemployment. The latest figures show that there's been a 97% increase in universal credit take-up. For those of you who know about universal credit, you'll know that although it is a benefit, it is by no means a benefit that is easy to survive on. And the government has mitigated that by giving a £20 uplift per week for universal credit claimants, but again, that still falls way short what it's like to have a decent standard of living. And even that £20, the government have said that they're going to potentially cancel that within 6 months. So what are we doing? So we're actually being quite proactive to try to help local unemployed people move into paid work, meaningful paid work. The Journey First programme launched on the 11th of January, and that's a scheme where we'll have additional staff. I think we've got 13 new staff who are going to be working with people who are in long-term unemployment or at risk of long-term unemployment, especially people with special educational needs, to ensure that they get appropriate training and support to not only find a job, but also actually to stay in that job as well. So that's really welcome news. In terms of our pledge to keep communities safe, strong, and to protect our most vulnerable, there's been plenty of media coverage about the impact on COVID in terms of domestic violence and then people's mental health, and that's something that the council is particularly concerned about and trying to sort of lead partners to mitigate that. You'll see at the back of the report that actual domestic violence figures have gone up significantly quarter by quarter, and this is really a plea to the government that we do need to think about investing in frontline mental health services, especially in the public health agenda that the council leads on. I think a lot of people think that the health agenda is led by the NHS, and actually it's not. It's led by public health, which is a council department. So there's some pressures on our work there, and then in terms of our pledge to keep our town clean, green and vibrant, I think a lot of people have been stuck in the house all year round and may not have seen that actually our council staff, our environmental team, have been out busy throughout the last 12 months. They have inspected over 3,000 kilometres of highways and completed over 4,000 highway repairs. They've actually cleaned 15,000 gullies, which is a phenomenal number, and they've also dealt with over 1,000 street lighting issues as well. So these are sometimes services that the public don't realise that council is delivering, and I just want to pay tribute to the staff that during lockdown, bins are still being emptied, and roads are still being fixed, and social workers are still going out trying to protect the most vulnerable in society as well. I mean, all in all, it paints that we're doing an okay job, but I think there are some messages that we have to give to the public. You know, what we've managed to achieve in Warrington has been down to the hard work and innovation of our officers and also the administration. There has to be a better way for central government to support local authorities, and it has to be a fairer way. You'll have seen an announcement from the government that they are putting infrastructure investment into various parts of the country where there are, you know, areas of deprivation, and it's really interesting that significant numbers of Conservative-led areas are getting much more investment, even though they have lower deprivation levels than towns like Warrington. So we're classed as Tier 2, and the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, his area, Richmondshire, has been put in Tier 1, even though it has no areas of deprivation like what we've got in Warrington. You know, when we think about Busey, Orford, Dalham, these are areas where we have significant issues around unemployment, around the skills agenda. People need, you know, some support to move into meaningful employment, and yet for some quirk of, you know, politics, I suppose, the government talks about a levelling up agenda and being there for the whole country, but when you look at the way that they spend their infrastructure money like this, it does make you wonder that you know, they say something with words in the press in one way, but actually their actions are completely different, and they go back to looking after their own areas. And it does make me wonder, you know, we do have a Conservative MP, and he has been very critical of this administration without actually giving any recognition whatsoever of the unfairness of the system in which we are operating against. If we were Richmond, if we were Northamptonshire, as it were, these are the areas that are Conservative-led councils, or even Conservative MPs, we would be getting significantly more funding than what we currently get from central government. So all in all, positive report, positive performance in Q3, but with some caveats that we are working in very difficult political and economic times.
Thank you for that very comprehensive report there, Councillor Patel. I've got a number of members who wish to ask questions, so I'll come to Councillor Higgins first, please.
Thank you, Councillor Borden. Well, firstly, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Patel and his team for such a positive report and well received, and I found it very enjoyable to read. The comments I'd like to make are on from page 33 under the priority list, and I think the first thing I'd like to say is that when we set out to design the Central 6 Master Plan, that was done to improve the Central 6, the lives of the Central 6 residents, and improve their life outcomes, health and well-being, etc. So I think it's with great pride that this master plan and the work that all the members, the elected members and the community groups, everyone associated with the Central 6, with the support of officers, that this has been recognised by an esteemed institution with a Royal Town Planning Institute Award nomination. Now we are in the finals for that nomination, so I think colleagues and everyone would support me in wishing them the best of luck, and hopefully that we will return with an award. It's truly deserved. The other point I'd like to pick up on is the Victoria Park improvements. Now, in February of 2020, just 12 months ago, I delivered the park's playing pitch strategy, and Victoria Stadium was very much at the heart of that strategy. And I'm really pleased that when we make a commitment, we deliver on that commitment, we follow through. And I'm really pleased that we have delivered a 3G pitch in partnership. Now, this is to improve the lives and outcomes of not just the people who live within the Central 6, but as the town as a whole, and to create a sporting centre of excellence. But we've delivered it, and we will continue to deliver it. Now, within that Victoria Park improvement, we're already made a commitment to improve the path which is used by the park run. Now, that's going to be a substantial cost, but the park run is used by over 300 people, and again, that's a further investment in our residents. Now, there's also a point here I'd like to raise about our community centres. Now, yes, they've all been closed during the COVID and the pandemic, but they are due to open from April the 13th in a very safe environment. But we will continue to support community groups. We have done, and we waived the cost. Now, that's a cost to the council, but that's supporting our residents and our community groups. So once they're able to access our community centres, we will continue to support our residents back to some kind of normality. So really, that's all I needed to say on that point. So thank you.
No, thank you for those really positive comments, Councillor Mundry. I think they were, sorry, Councillor Higgins, really useful. So I've got Councillor Mundry on the mind because I'm trying to get him into the meeting at the moment. OK, Councillor Mitchell's next, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just really wanted to mention the new cycleway from Burton to Omega. An absolutely fantastic investment by the council in the village. What it's done is it's connected us up to the cycling network so we can get there safely, and safe access to work on Omega is a huge opportunity for residents to be able to get into that. It's really well used. I've noticed, I've tried it myself a couple of times, both cycling and walking, and it's really been enjoyed by people in the village for leisure as well. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all the officers that were involved in that, and of course Councillor Mundry, thank you so much.
Thanks for those comments there, Councillor Mitchell. Of course, hopefully the public have recognised that new cycleway and pathway is going to be named after the late Councillor Terry O'Neill, who was a fantastic leader of this council as my predecessor. And I agree, I walked that length with you last week, Councillor Mitchell, and it is really fantastic change for the people of Burton Wood in terms of being able to safely move around the borough. Next question then, I've got Councillor Guthrie, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Have we lost you, Councillor Guthrie? Have you put yourself on mute?
Yes. I was just reiterating some comments that Councillor Patel gave in his report. I mean, during COVID, we've kept all our waste collections going, and we're so proud of our staff who have gone out every day to empty our bins. They're real stars in this. And we also want to make a comment about sort of our green spaces. It's our volunteers that were out, who are normally out there litter picking. Sadly, due to COVID, they had to stop for a while. But in recent times, we've seen the establishment of new litter networks. These have been out collecting litter, and we've been working in partnership with them and picking up litter bags and equipment so they can use it. And up to date, they've collected 790 bags to date. That was the final update we got today. And we want to strengthen this partnership so we can all work together to ensure that we have a cleaner, greener town for the future. So thank you.
Thank you for those positive comments as well, Councillor Guthrie. I think Councillor Patel's getting a bit of an easy night here. Everyone's just making comments rather than asking him questions. I've got Councillor McLaughlin next, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, it's more of a comment than a question. Thank you. We've said lots of fantastic work that's going on that I think we can all be proud of. I want to draw your attention a little bit to homelessness on page 39. The council's worked incredibly hard on homelessness, and in the pandemic, it was obviously a very difficult time, but we pulled together with our volunteers and we got the accommodation we needed. And as we opened up after the first lockdown, we were able to put in new facilities, which a lot of other councils didn't have the opportunity to do, but we did put in new facilities and get wraparound support for some of our most vulnerable people. And so it's pleasing that the recent rough sleep account, there's a snapshot on one day, but it was taken back in November, and it was confirmed to be one rough sleeper, which is a fantastic achievement for everybody working in homelessness. But we're very aware of the increasing amount of people requiring our support. The increasing amount of people that we're having to rely on bed and breakfast accommodation and hotel accommodation to keep a roof over people's heads, and we can see that in the future this is not going to get easier. Particularly concerned about what happens when evictions start again, and when landlords are able to evict people that for no fault of their own may not have been able to pay the rent every month. They may be in arrears, and there's a lot of work there to do with those residents, see whatever we can do to support them, but it is a real concern. And just to assure everyone that I'm very focused on this, as are the team, and whatever we can do to get the support that's going to be needed as that comes forward.
Thank you very much for those comments as well, Councillor McLaughlin. You've obviously heard from 4 colleagues. Councillor Patel, do you want to come back on any of those points?
Well, just I think what Councillor McLaughlin has highlighted is just the impact COVID has had on the council and how the council has responded. And I think sometimes, a lot of credit has rightly been given to the NHS. But I would also like to also give credit to public sector staff in local government who have responded really well to the pandemic as well. If you look at our waiting times for the contact centre, they have risen significantly, and they're not at a level I am happy with. But at the same time, when you dig deeper as to why the calls are as long as they are, it's because people are ringing us to talk about business grants, to talk about what COVID support is out there, and to talk about other help to mitigate the impact of this awful pandemic. So when we talk as an administration about, doing whatever it takes, and responding to that challenge by government, we have literally put money where our put money forward to mitigate the impact of COVID, and the government hasn't really stepped up in the same way local authorities have stepped up. Yes, they've given lots of contracts. They've given a lot of contracts to their mates, so maybe we need to invest in making friends with the government and see if we can get some backhanders in that respect. When I say that, I should say it through the procurement policy of being able to be awarded a contract based on who we know, as opposed to track record and things like that. But I think it's quite clear that local authorities are struggling financially because of the pandemic, and despite that, we are still trying to deliver as best as we can and protect the residents as best as we can.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Patel. Before I bring it to the vote then, just make a couple of observations and comments myself. You obviously raised the issue about levelling up. I think what we're seeing is certainly a degree of levelling down at the moment. And it's extremely disappointing to see areas across the north and northwest and ourselves who are disadvantaged by the criteria that the government has announced for levelling up. And as you pointed out, the fact that the Chancellor's own constituency in Richmondshire, in North Yorkshire, ends up being in Tier 1, it's got to raise a few eyebrows, I'm sure. But I mean, my kind of disappointment never seems to go away, really. And we had exactly the same over, flood relief funding, where we've been unsuccessful in getting any financial support from government in relation to the recent floods that we saw across the town. And if record river levels 1.5 feet higher than anything ever recorded aren't an indication of climate change and a need to address, flooding here in Warrington. I don't really know what is. So, that was an extremely disappointing and saddening outcome. I think across the performance report, we don't set ourselves easy targets. We've set ourselves stretching and demanding targets which reflect our priorities and our pledges and the corporate strategy. And I think the general direction of travel across the piece has been excellent. I think through the comments of yourself, Councillor Patel, and colleagues around the meeting, we've highlighted those key areas of concern and issue, and they're properly justified and explained. COVID has without doubt been really stretching for the nation, and it's no different for us here in Warrington as a council and for our residents, and I think we're seeing the impact of that in some key areas that have been highlighted in terms of homelessness, number of nights in supported accommodation, and obviously less acceptable issues such as domestic abuse and violence. So all areas which I know that you and our professional officers in the council continue to push really hard on in terms of improving outcomes and our performance collectively. So I think it's an excellent report. I think it really demonstrates the commitment of us as a cabinet and the council, but also of officers throughout the council to deliver on our commitments to the people of Warrington. OK, we've had a number of questions, colleagues. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Patel's report?
Happy to second, Councillor Burton. OK, that's Councillor Higgins then, in which case we'll move to the vote. It's not a formally recorded vote, but for the purposes of this broadcast meeting, I'll go through colleagues in turn.
Sorry, Chair, before you go to the vote, just let me clarify that comment I made about the government giving funding to various suppliers. I'm not accusing the government of doing anything criminal. The Nolan principles are very clear about people in public service avoiding the perception of doing anything wrong. But I think it's quite clear when I use the phrase backhander is probably not the right word. But the point is that there is a correlation between contracts being given out and donations and support being given to various MPs of a particular party. Just to clarify that comment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. I didn't take anything bad from your comment. I think there's been enough coverage of this in the media. Certainly, the Good Law Project through Jolyon Morn, for example, have highlighted the inconsistencies and certainly non-level playing field, should we put it that way, in relation to government procurement over the last 12 months. So I don't think your comments will come as a surprise to anybody. OK, in terms of the vote, as I said, it's not a formally recorded vote, but I'll have to come through members in turn in order to meet the requirements for our meeting. So Councillor Bowden for, Councillor Guthrie
for,
Councillor Higgins
For,
Councillor Jennings
For,
Councillor McLaughlin
For,
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
I'm not sure if Councillor Mundry has joined us yet. Has he? Is he able to vote?
No, not yet.
OK, sorry, we've got a few technical difficulties tonight. Councillor Patel.
For.
And Councillor Smith.
For.
OK, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. Move on then, please, to item 5, Climate Emergency Declaration, Cabinet Update. Councillor Guthrie, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report comes from the climate emergency declaration that we made way back now in June 2019. We declared that at full council and committed the council to taking steps to cut carbon emissions in line with an aspiration to achieve zero carbon by 2030. In March 2020, the Cabinet agreed the formation of the Climate Emergency Commission, and this report is to update Cabinet on the progress to date. And before I start, can I thank Linton and his team for their commitment to producing this report. It's an excellent document and details the journey that we've taken. And can I also thank Dr. David Ellis for his leadership in terms of climate change, which is second to none, and Lewis Groke, who's our Vice Chair, who's really energised the youth contribution to this report. Just to give some background, the global average temperature has risen by around 1% since pre-industrial levels, and risks to our climate are increasingly apparent. If we act quickly, we can reduce our emissions and hopefully get them, keep them below 1.5 centigrade, which is considered fairly safe. But if we don't, it will cause irreversible harm to life, and we've seen that over and over on television programmes, that something's got to change. Our climate declaration, as I said, was passed at full council and then was approved by Cabinet. And our Climate Change Emergency Commission has been actively engaged with setting out an action plan and has formed an implementation team. The actions and planning are set out in this progress report and are designed to help Warrington achieve its ambitious net zero gain. In order to ensure a quick response to the declaration, the Year 1 action plan can be found, a highlight report can be found in Appendix A of this report. Just to show you a little snapshot really of our year 1 actions, we've set out sort of 3 headings. Warrington Borough Council's own emissions and investments, which talks about what we actually do as a council, the engagement and awareness that we're hoping to take through, and also the health and well-being, travel, housing and environment that will come from this initiative. In terms of our emissions and investments, we've started to look at carbon literacy training, because we really want to know what carbon literacy means to all our projects in the future. We've started, all the members of the Climate Emergency Commission have now undergone carbon literacy training, and we're hoping to roll that out for members and for staff alike. And the rollout will be given through our in-house training team. We've also looked at electric vehicles, which represent the future, and that we will need to introduce electric vehicles fully into our fleet. This work has started and charge points have been installed for the council's own use. The council will continue to investigate viable routes of external grants or funding to drive this. There's also a need to carry out a fleet review and transition plan, but that's ongoing work. Some of the documents that required a review are the travel policy and the council's carbon footprint. They would need to ensure that the climate considerations are included within our local plan. The associated policies and strategies would be there. There would be also a need to assess climate impact, all major projects and decisions, and produce a feasibility study for decarbonising heat for Warrington Borough Council buildings, as well as taking the carbon impact into account for all our sourcing and all our tendering processes. One of our successes, the council took ownership of its York solar farm in December 2019. And the farm has performed so well during the last year, with the solar panels exceeding their performance target by 25%. I mean, York is a 35 megawatt solar farm, which will generate enough energy to power 10,000 homes and will save 15,000 tonnes worth of carbon per annum. And that's exceptional. The batteries at the site became fully operational in October 2020 and have played a vital role in balancing the grid during the winter period, because they obviously can store electricity and they sort of discharge it when the grid needs it. And the York Solar Farm is the UK's largest and most technically advanced solar and battery storage project. And believe you me, it's the most fascinating place to visit. The council took ownership of its Hull solar farm in October 2020. Hull is a 25 megawatt solar farm which will save 10,000 tonnes worth of carbon and generate enough energy to power 8,000 homes. And the batteries are to be fitted at some time this spring. From April 2021, the Hull solar farm will supply the council with all its green electricity needs. The council has also purchased a 50% stake into Together Energy, and in October 2018 they did it to promote its green ambitions. This has progressed further and has become quite exceptional in terms of how it's performing. We now are the lowest in the northwest for fuel poverty, which is something that we should be proud of. The council in October 2020 became only the second council in a generation to issue a community investment bond. A £1 million bond was offered to the public to invest for as little as £5, and this was taken up very quickly. The bond issue was a complete success, and it will go to building our new proposed solar farm in Cirencester. Other councils are really interested in what we've done, and they're working with Dublin University on a research paper on the future of such bonds in the future of the UK. Going on to page 64 to talk about our engagement strategy. We're hoping to kick off our engagement strategy as soon as possible, which will feed from our website, and hopefully we will give the chance for people to we will distribute questionnaires to public and businesses to gauge what people actually want from this. But there are four main strands to our engagement. One is the Warrington Public Climate Forum, designed to find out what makes people tick. We want to generate ideas. We want to make sure that we understand what the public wants from the climate change emergency. We're also going to consult, obviously, with Warrington Borough Council's employees and other local climate forums designed to seek the views of council employees, parish councils, NHS organisations, emergency services, Livewire, the Environment Agency and social housing providers. One of the things we're very clear on is we want to engage the youth. And so we want to establish a Warrington Young People's Climate Forum. This will bring together children and young adults from across the borough to hear from expert speakers and feedback their own ideas on how Warrington can achieve our zero carbon ambitions. And the last part of it is to engage with Warrington's businesses, because we need to understand the industry and commercial sector and what they're actually looking at in terms of reducing their carbon footprint. But there's a great potential to engage with businesses and to reduce their energy use. Moving on to the health and well-being issues, we looked at 5 main areas: housing, transport, extreme weather, waste and recycling, and the natural environment. And if you look at our local transport plan, which is well on the way to actually producing some major climate change and air quality issues. 2 of the policies in LTP4 said that we would investigate how we best support local fleet operators and switch to vehicles to use cleaner fuels. And also we will investigate how we can best support local residents to switch to vehicles that are powered by cleaner fuels. To progress these commitments, we commissioned a consultancy support to develop Warrington electric vehicle strategy, which you'll see a draft executive summary in Appendix 2. Part of the strategy looks at the perceived barriers on the take-up of EVs and provides an insight into the EV use in Warrington currently, which is currently quite low. And it proposes a series of measures for supporting the uptake of EVs amongst residents, commuters and businesses, and hopefully see the decline of the use of internal combustion engines. The council now wishes to consult with public and stakeholders on the draft strategy, and it's proposed that this would be part of a wider consultation aimed at understanding directly from residents what the current barriers are to the uptake of electric vehicles and where the council can best target any resources. Part of the LTP4 was about looking at active travel, and these include the developments of the first and last mile transport master plan, and encourage lots of cycling and walking. And if you look at the infrastructure that we've already put in, it's quite tremendous. We've already mentioned the Burton Wood to Amiga Cycleway, which is now complete, which is a really good sort of piece of work. We've also got the Chester Road Cycleway, which is now under construction, and the Trent Pennine Trail enhancements, which is the London Road to Knutsford Road, which is also under construction. So we're actually working really hard for these initiatives to happen. We've also got our local energy company, Incrementum, which is pioneering green energy technology in its first 2 housing schemes, which are currently under construction. The 161 townhouses and apartments in Sycamore Lane and Chatfield Drive will be supplied with energy from a communal ground source heat pump, which the council are pioneering with the assistance of Together Energy and roof mounted solar, and they will also have roof mounted solar panels. The solar panels will provide free energy to tenants as part of the council's pledge to fight fuel poverty. So there are lots of sort of major initiatives sort of going on. In terms of community energy, in 2019, the Cabinet approved the establishment of the Community Energy Benefit Fund, and Warrington Community Energy was established as a charitable community benefit society through the Financial Conduct Authority. The pandemic's also obviously delayed lots of things, but we have received a £50,000 donation from GridServe, negotiated as part of the York and Hull solar farm deals, and we'll receive a yearly 50,000 from Together Energy and 85,000 from the council's solar companies to be spent on community energy and green schemes in Warrington. One of the initiatives that's already being funded by this is Lim Community Energy, who's been enabled to look at, who's been enabled to get a grant to look at the feasibility study for a potential solar PV farm in South Warrington. If you turn to page 68, if we look at the details of the environment, social and governance policy is there. And the council will incorporate all the environment, social and governance issues into its analysis and decision-making processes when considering the Treasury portfolio and investments. And the council will seek to use data and analysis to determine the type and materiality of relevant issues for counterparties and their alignment with the council's core principles. And that's one of the main things that goes through this report. We've worked closely with Birchwood Park, with management on climate green energy issues, and the Birchwood Park manager is actually part of the council's green energy project group to ensure alignment of interests. We've also we've worked with Innovate UK to successfully bid for funding for UK research and innovation as part of their Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme. We've got at 11.3 you'll see a list of the key project partners which we've negotiated with. If I look to item 12, we've also produced a plastic strategy. A copy of the draft strategy can be seen in Appendix 3, and this really concentrates on that the council will act to remove and reduce the use of single plastics from its operations and services for all staff, and will work proactively with partners to provide positive solutions for reducing unnecessary plastic waste across the borough. And we're hoping to work quite closely with volunteers that we have in that sector. So in terms of the recommendation, the Cabinet is recommended to note this report, approve the consultation for the draft EV strategy, and approve the report going to a future full meeting of the Council. But this is an excellent report and shows the amount of work that we're actually doing in terms of climate change. So I recommend this to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Councillor Guthrie. And all I can say is, wow, really. I mean, that is a blockbuster of a report. 10 pages plus appendices, which really demonstrate the commitment that this administration has had to the whole climate change agenda. And what we haven't done is just simply declare a climate emergency and then wonder what we're going to do next. Actually, a lot of this work was already in train. We've worked really cooperatively with our Climate Change Commission, and I extend my thanks to David Ellis and Louis Grauke, as you mentioned, for their support in making that a genuine council and community initiative. And before I come in with my comments, I think we've got one question from Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a comment, and perhaps Judith will have some thoughts on this as well. First of all, I just want to pick up what Judith said about our housing company. It's fantastic that we are leading the way with what we expect to see in developments and not waiting for someone else to set standards for us. You'll remember that there were strong environmental standards, but wouldn't be necessarily seen as strong now. Back 10 years ago, and then we started getting this cut the green crap thing from the government, from the Tories, and now they're starting to talk the talk about being environmental. But if we look at 7.11 in the report, and it talks about some of the grants that the government's put forward. And they'd really love to put forward big grant numbers and say they're spending lots of money, but how much of it is really going to what's needed to help our communities, to help our homes be more environmentally friendly, to cut down on energy bills? I'm aware, certainly with the private green homes grant voucher scheme, it's been incredibly difficult to access, and most of it won't be spent. It'd be really interesting to see how that money is spent, and whether Judith has any thoughts on that, because the reports are saying it's running till the end of March, and that's it. After that, you won't be able to access any of that money. A lot of people who have tried to access it have been caught up with all the different regulations about what they can spend the money on, what they can't, which companies they can use, and so on. We have been successful in getting a small amount of money, which, well, it sounds like a large amount, but it's across Cheshire and Warrington, and it's looking at improving 205 properties. But we've got a long way to go, haven't we, with the kinds of homes that we have in the town and some of the standards that were very low in the past. And using innovative ways of making them more energy friendly, and installing the things that will reduce our consumption of carbon fuel. So just wanted to touch on that, but we're leading the way, and hopefully where we lead, others will follow.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right there. I mean, one of the problems with this grant, that it was administered by an American company. It wasn't even being administered through the UK. We have got a bit of leeway now, apparently. We were supposed to have spent this money by December, but we've now been given till March 22 to actually spend it. So we may be able to actually spend a bit more. But you're right, it's all about how it's actually been addressed, and it's not been very clear by the government about how this is going to pan out. But it's where the money's going to go afterwards. If it's not spent, then where's it going to go?
I'm sure it will just be announced as new money somewhere else. It's the recycling of cash. Our former colleague, Councillor Bennett, was very good at spending our reserves many times over. In terms of my comments, Councillor Guthrie, I mean, I said before about a fantastic report, and I think there's a lot to commend you, the council and officers for delivering in the past few years. And certainly the solar farms, I think, are a great exemplar of vision and success of delivering on our green agenda. Warrington will be the first council that is 100% supplied by its own generated electricity, for example, and that is a fantastic achievement. I probably want to take the opportunity to perhaps correct some of the myths around Together Energy and our investment in that company. Certainly, 18 months ago, the company wasn't performing particularly well, and it was struggling in terms of customer service on the back of taking on customers from another supplier as a supplier of last resort when that company failed. And what we've seen is an incredible transformation in Together Energy. It's moved from the lowest rated supplier in the country now to being number 16 of 35, for example. This year it's moved into, its last trading year, it's moved into profitable trading for the first time. It's massively increased its customer book, partly through the acquisition of Bristol Energy. And actually, far beyond that, it's helping the council in a genuine partnership to tackle areas such as fuel poverty, looking to work with our registered social landlords in the town, tackling prepayment meters, addressing genuine concerns around that. But obviously, also moving its own supply, in the relatively short time that the council has been a 50% stakeholder. It's moved its own supply to Ørsted, one of the world's leading green energy suppliers, and I think the future for Together Energy in partnership with Warrington is really, really exciting. And there's a lot of nonsense spoken around Together Energy and our investment, but actually, once again, I think Warrington has led the way in terms of creative and innovative approaches, not making the same mistakes that other councils have made, but actually genuinely finding a way of making a real tangible difference in the energy supply market and improving outcomes for people here in Warrington. And you see, of course, where they help us in other ways. Councillor McLaughlin talked about incremental housing. I went to look at the Foxwood scheme a couple of weeks ago, and looking at the ground source heat pump options, which are going to really tackle fuel costs for people that move into those properties. Again, absolutely groundbreaking work. So throughout the whole of the green agenda, I think you ought to be commended for your leadership, working with officers on really bringing a coherent strategy together which covers so many aspects of the council's delivery. And you just see that through the appendices, real ambition around electric vehicles, but even issues such as single-use plastic, where we need to develop policy and make a stand and improve our environment, our performance, and obviously our climate collectively. So absolutely well done. Real barnstorming report, really, I think, which really shows what we've delivered in the last few years. And of course, there are some who talk big on the green agenda, and some who even use that in their naming. I never see any of those groups come forward with real credible policies that would make a difference here in Warrington. And I think actually what you see is it's this Labour administration that's leading the way on the clean and green agenda here in Warrington. So absolutely well done. If there are no further comments, can I see if we've got a seconder for this report?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Sorry, was that Councillor McLaughlin?
Yeah, there's someone else.
Okay, well, we'll take Councillor McLaughlin. Okay, and in relation to the recommendation at 17.1, item 3 says about approving the report going to a future meeting of the council. I see absolutely no reason why we should delay on taking that to the full council, and our next meeting is on the 29th of March, so I'd hope that we can present this to council in 3 weeks' time in order to demonstrate success on our journey so far. Okay, if we can move to the vote then, in the same way as before. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie,
4.
Councillor Higgins,
4.
Councillor Jennings,
4.
Councillor McLaughlin,
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
I'm hoping Councillor Mundry can hear us. Councillor Mundry.
Yeah, 4. I've been hearing you all the time, Russ, but on the I could only watch. I couldn't speak.
Oh, you're back. I can see you now. Oh, well done. We got there in the end. Councillor Patel.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Wonderful. Thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. OK, moving on to item 6 then. Hackney Carriage Table of Fares Review. Councillor Guthrie again, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to do with the Hackney Carriage Table of Fares Review. And its purpose is to prove officers to consult on the proposed table of fares increase agreed at the meeting of the Licensing Committee on the 12th of January this year, and to adopt the table of fares which is included in this report if no objections are received. The last change to the Hackney Table of Fares was made on the 25th of February 2014, so you can appreciate it's been a long time since we actually increased any fares, and the taxi drivers in Warrington are obviously sort of need this uplift in view of the times that we've been through recently. The legal implications are on page 90 for you to read. And if the committee resolves to vary the table of fares, then the council must publish a notice detailing the proposed variations of the table of fares in a local newspaper. The duration of which should be not less than 14 days from the date of the first publication of the notice. And a copy of the variation would also be available at the Town Hall for inspection. So the reasons for recommendation: to ensure the council acts in accordance with its constitution and the statutory provisions in consulting on and adopting an updated table of Hackney carriage fares, which remains an executive function. So the recommendations are on page 91 to page 92, and I'm not reading them out. But agenda item 6, the proposed table of Hackney carriage fares, is on page 93. Thank you.
OK, thank you for that, Councillor Guthrie. Short and sweet. I don't think we've got any questions from members that have indicated. I think it's fair to say that Hackney carriage fares haven't changed for a number of years now. And clearly, kind of, in terms of COVID and post-COVID recovery, there's obviously an issue for the licensed taxi trade in terms of their fares and being able to continue making a living. So I think it's fair to recognise that with the proposed fares. And obviously, there's still work to do for the council's licensing committee in terms of implementing those. So I think the recommendations are straightforward. Do we have a seconder for this report?
I'm happy to second it.
OK, that's Councillor Mitchell then. Thank you. In which case we can move to the vote. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie,
4.
Councillor Higgins,
4.
Councillor Jennings,
4.
Councillor McLaughlin,
4.
Councillor Mitchell,
4.
Councillor Mundry,
4.
Councillor Patel,
4.
and Councillor Smith.
4.
OK, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. On to agenda item 7, budget monitoring 2020/21, quarter 3. Councillor Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Chair. So in February last year, the council approved a budget of just under £140 million. To achieve that figure, there had to be savings or cuts of £14 million. Since 2010, the councils had to make cuts of almost £160 million because of cuts in funding by the Conservative government. Any efficiencies which could be made to save money happened a long time ago. It's laughable to think that we could be more than a decade into Conservative austerity and still have a couple of easy savings up our sleeve. Well, that's what's being suggested in some quarters. At the end of quarter 3, we're forecasting an overspend of £21.5 million. Most of that is COVID related. This time last year, the overspend was just under £3 million at this point. The government promised to reimburse councils across the country for the extra spending on COVID. Sadly, that was yet another broken promise, and the council have to foot the bill for the money that the government hasn't paid back. The best estimate of the end of year position is that the overspend will be about £4 million, in the hope that some promised support from government will come through. Our staff have worked their socks off during the pandemic, and I would like to thank them all for everything that they've done and are still doing. Instead of saving money on services, the costs have gone up throughout the pandemic. The money that normally comes into the council, such as car parking, has gone down. So income's gone down and costs have gone up all across the board, as you can see from the report. Thankfully, the council's careful financial management has put us in a stronger position than most. Our strategy of investing to generate income to pay for services has made us resilient when other councils of all parties are running into trouble. We're in a healthy position with regard to reserves, but you can only spend them once, and they're having to plug gaps in funding caused by this government. The recommendation is at paragraph 13 of the report, and it's just to note, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell, and a relatively brief presentation of actually, what's a really important report with a number of implications. And I think you're absolutely right to talk about broken promises. And we're in the position we are because the government failed to deliver on its promise to do what it takes to support councils doing a really important job supporting the nation and their communities throughout the COVID crisis. I think actually the fact that we've ended up in a position with a £4 million overspend is actually, a great result. Looking at the tremendous work that's been done to appraise reserves, to look at, how we may well make savings throughout the year in order to address what is a massive shortfall in funding is really important. So well done to you and to the officers. I'm just looking who's raised their hand for a question. It's Councillor McLaughlin. Okay, I'll come to you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. It's just a question for Councillor Mitchell. And I think we all know the answer to this question, but it's worth reiterating. If we hadn't made the investments that we've been criticised for by some quarters, what would this position look like?
Thanks for the question, Councillor McLaughlin. Our investments raise a net amount of over £20 million every single year. And so if you took that away, you could certainly pay all that back, you could pay all that debt back, and you could get rid of the investments, as some are suggesting. But looking forward to the next year, we've got 11 point something million gap in our budget. You'd be looking at 30, nearly £40 million gap in the budget. You would be slashing services. It doesn't really bear thinking about what we would do without these investments. And when I say net, that's after all of the costs have gone out, all of the borrowing, all looking after these objects, and also a reserve paid for by the investments in case anything goes wrong, because we're very careful about what we do. But thanks for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Okay, colleagues, any other questions? I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Mitchell, to pick up on suggestions that somehow there's a third way around the council's financial position. You either support the use of capital to make sound acquisitions and to generate income, or you support council tax freezes and cuts. There is no option other than that. And I think, you know, the question from Councillor McLaughlin perfectly illustrates that. Without the strategy adopted by this council over the last decade, we would not be delivering services at a level that we have been able to do. You know, whether that be maintaining the libraries, we haven't closed one single library in the last 10 years, whether it's about supporting our community centres, or some of the really valuable non-statutory work that we do within the town of Warrington. None of that would have been possible without an ambitious, creative investment programme, properly risk assessed with appropriate due diligence, that actually ensured this council could do its best to support the people of Warrington. And, you know, it's easy to forget the legacy debt left by the previous administration, which cost around 5p in every pound to service that debt when we came into administration in 2011. Actually, if you looked at the Warrington pound now, it would be a negative number. Through the great work that we have done as an administration, as a team with our fantastic officers, to ensure that, you know, we can continue keeping this show on the road. And, you know, it's absolutely risible to suggest that you can come back in after 10 years and look at efficiency savings in order to justify a council tax freeze. It is total bunkum, and it needs exposing for being exactly that. You can't trust them in Westminster. The one thing I can guarantee is you can't trust them in Warrington. So, you know, absolutely, we've done the job, and now is not the time to be questioning the approach that we've taken or the results that we continue to deliver year on year. Councillor Patel has indicated a question, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure how I can beat that phrase. You can't trust them in Westminster. You can't trust them in Warrington. But one thing I want to ask is, you know, the alternative of not doing this is to raise council tax, and that's something that's deeply unpopular. And I've seen that on one of our local MPs off Facebook posts or whatever. You know, he's been quite critical of the council for raising council tax the way we are proposing to for next year. How does our council tax levels compare in Warrington? So how do our council tax levels in Warrington compare to other neighbouring areas? Are we lower? Are we higher? Because I think that puts into context a little bit about our strategy of raising funds either from the taxpayer directly or through an investment strategy.
Many thanks for the question. The level of council tax in Warrington is one of the lowest in the northwest, and when you combine that with the government funding that we get being also one of the lowest in the country, that means that we are one of the most poorly funded councils in the country. So we were going into the budget next year, £11 million funding gap because of these factors and because of not being paid back for COVID and all of these different things. So you're looking at an 11 million gap to fill because we're not in the most wealthy area with expensive properties that generate a lot of council tax, even though we've had to put council tax up, and that was not an easy decision, but that's got to be set against the decision to cut services for the most vulnerable people in the town. It's not an easy decision at all, but you know, we've done what we had to do. That still doesn't plug the gap. The extra funding that we'll get from the council tax is about £5 million. So you've still got a gap to fill, which we're going to have to deal with by way of savings and also to try and generate more money. This is not easy. There are no easy answers here, but we're trying to steer a course to protect services because that's our values. We value public services. The Conservatives do not.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think, you know, Councillor Patel's question, you can broaden out a bit more, can't you? You know, of a 4.98% council tax rise that was agreed at full cabinet, full council last week, 3% of that is the adult social care precept. When you have a government that does its own calculations on core spending power for local authorities, on the assumption that every single council that has adult social care responsibility will implement like council tax rise, that tells you exactly where we're at. Slopey shoulders, you know, are barely adequate sticking plaster for the crisis of adult social care that we face as a nation. And you know, just passing the buck to local authorities and hard-pressed families through council tax is not the way to approach this issue. But you know, it's rather underhand to then criticise councils that exercise that option as if somehow they're doing something wrong. I think any council with adult social care responsibility would recognise the massive demand pressures and feel that they had no choice but to implement that precept. And yeah, Warrington is no different in that regard. But anyone that tells you you can freeze council tax in a climate where you have increasing costs and you have increasing demand is only ever offering the public one thing, and that is a cut in services and a cut in support to the most vulnerable in their community. And that to me is callous and heartless and doesn't actually recognise the reality of what many people in our town suffer from, regardless of where they live and their level of prosperity. Have we got any further comments or questions? No? Okay, have we got a seconder for this report?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's Councillor Guthrie, thank you. Okay, moving to the vote then. Councillor Bowden, for. Councillor Guthrie?
For.
Councillor Higgins?
For.
Councillor Jennings?
For.
Councillor McLaughlin?
For.
Councillor Mitchell?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Patel?
For.
And Councillor Smith?
For.
Thank you, colleagues, that's unanimous. Agenda item 8 is the Capital Programme Monitoring Report for Q3. An update from Councillor Mitchell, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the report to update Cabinet on the Council's Capital Investment Programme. Appendix 1 of your report provides a full list of the projects. Projects being funded by development course Section 106 schemes are set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Changes to the planned budget are set out in paragraph 3.7 of the report, and there's further detail at Appendix 3. Appendix 4 sets out a list of projects which haven't been put in the capital programme yet. The schemes I want to highlight include transformation to bring services online, which improves access for people, and it'll also help us to save money on the budget. The next things to be added to that scheme are fly tipping, dog fouling, pests and food hygiene. COVID has impacted this work being done as the teams involved have been working flat out to ensure that government grants for business get to where they're needed as quickly as possible, and I thank them for their efforts in doing that. The Western Link detailed design is now underway, which will lead to a planning application in May this year. Funding of the scheme is subject to the approval of a business case, which will be scrutinised by the Department for Transport. Busey and Dalham Hub. This is a project nearing completion and again within budget. There's been delays due to COVID and recent flooding, and we're waiting for an update from the contractor. Times Square. We've agreed heads of terms with another 2 operators and heads of terms with the University of Chester to occupy Unit 2 and the mezzanine floor. We're continuing to receive inquiries from other operators regarding the other units. The bus depot is making good progress. £7 million of external funding is secured. Work should start later this year. Now, the council's been approached by the LEP, who are administrating the Getting Building Fund, which is funding £5.2 million for the new depot. The LEP need to spend £4.2 million of that funding this financial year by March. So they've asked whether they can spend the £4.2 million on the Centre Park project instead, as that will be completed by March, instead of funding that the council would have put into it at this point. Therefore, the council will put £5 million into the depot this year, and the LEP would then put £1 million into the depot next year and pick up the outstanding balance that would have been spent on Centre Park. and that means that the Getting Building Fund will be used and it delays our spend. And Cabinet, I hope you understood all that, are asked to approve the switching of the funding between the two schemes. I'll also update you on our solar farms. York performing above expectations in terms of energy yield. Prices have dropped due to COVID, but they're going up again. In Hull, that was completed in September. Battery storage is now being installed. We'd expect to be completed by September this year. Negotiations are ongoing with npower over the management of the farm. Cirencester grid server undertaking technical investigations. Negotiations are ongoing with GridServe to finalise the funding agreement. The £1 million funding target is achieved from 2,000 plus investors. Also, the Housing Association loans. Council have got a £30 million loan facility in place with Johnny Johnson, which is a Northwest based housing association. They're currently tendering for another £10 million revolving credit agreement loan. The council's expressed an interest in providing it. If it's successful, it needs to be completed by the 31st of March. So approval is sought from Cabinet if the council successfully wins that loan tender, and that's in the recommendations. So the recommendations are at paragraph 19 of the report, and I've already given you the details about the approval set out in the recommendation, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mitchell. Have you got any comments or questions from colleagues? I think it's fairly straightforward. I think in terms of my observations, Councillor Mitchell, I recognise the comment you made in relation to the bus depot and the switching of funding there. I mean, obviously the new bus depot has got an important link to our clean and green agenda that Councillor Guthrie presented earlier, and so I think that's to be commended. I suppose one of the aspects around the bus depot that continues to disappoint me is around the Towns Fund and the town deal, because obviously the bus depot relocation was a major part of our bid to government for a share of that town deal's money. And you know, we asked for 26.5 million, we got 22.1 million. So that's a £4.5 million shortfall that we're going to have to make up across the 7 really key and crucial projects that we put forward as part of that. So I think it's really important we keep the momentum on the bus depot. So I think reallocating the Getting Building Fund money and you know, is a really key part of that to work towards that green agenda. So well done with that. I think across the whole of the portfolio, you know, continue to demonstrate great value for our investments and great value for the people of Warrington. You know, and there's that obvious link with your previous report in agenda item 7 around revenue, because you know, the success of these schemes drives income for the council, which goes into providing vital services, and that's, you know, totally crucial to our mission and meeting our pledges and priorities. So well done to you and officers for that. Given that there's no comments or questions from other members, have we got a seconder for this report?
Happy to second it.
I think that Councillor Smith?
It was, I think.
Okay, I'll take it as Councillor Smith. Okay, so going on to the vote then, colleagues. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie?
4.
Councillor Higgins?
4.
Councillor Jennings?
4.
Councillor McLaughlin?
4.
Councillor Mitchell?
4.
Councillor Mundry?
4.
Councillor Patel?
4. I'm sorry, Chair, but
It's okay. No, don't worry about it, Councillor. I think it's lovely to see young people taking an active interest in politics so early. Councillor Smith?
4.
Wonderful. Thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. Agenda item 9 then, COVID-19 procurement arrangements. Councillor Mitchell again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So when COVID hit, the government relaxed the rules for councils in obtaining goods and services, removing the need to tender. And this is because it was difficult for companies to fulfil the requirements, and also because urgent decisions were having to be made. We have this report at every Cabinet meeting to look at what decisions have been made under these provisions, and that's for the purpose of transparency in procurement, which is really important. Now, there haven't been any contracts done under this report this time, but the only action I've got this month is to extend the delegated decisions. So what we did in the original report was Cabinet enacted the regulations that government had made to allow our staff to have these delegated powers. So I want to extend those delegated decisions until the 31st of July 2021, which will enable the council to respond to the changing situation, as we're clearly not out of the woods yet. The recommendation, Chairs, at paragraph 12 in the report.
Thank you to Councillor Mitchell. That looks pretty straightforward. I don't think there's any comments or questions from colleagues, so no problem. Do we have a seconder for this report?
I'm happy to second. See, we can't catch each other's eyes, Councillor Bowden.
I know this is always the trouble, isn't it? But anyway, thank you. I'll take that as Councillor McLaughlin, because you've been very, very keen tonight. So thank you. So in terms of the vote then, Councillor Bowden for, Councillor Guthrie?
For.
Councillor Higgins?
For.
Councillor Jennings? For. Councillor McLaughlin?
For.
Councillor Mitchell?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Patel?
For.
Councillor Smith? Councillor Smith? I hope he hasn't left us, because he's got the next item on the agenda.
For. Can you hear me? I am here. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Having some internet problems, I think. Hopefully it'll hold up for the next item.
Well, hopefully you will, because otherwise I'll have to fill in for you, and then you'll be really stretching me. So, okay. But, thanks for that, Councillor Smith. And that was unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Agenda item 10 is the use of a DPS for holiday activities and food grants. Councillor Smith, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll start off by describing the holiday activity and food grant and then move on to the dynamic purchasing system. Cabinet colleagues will be aware of the public outrage caused by the government last year when they said they would not cover the cost of free meals for disadvantaged children during school holidays. This subsequently became the subject of one of the dizzying number of government U-turns around that time, as public opinion shamed them into doing the right thing. Sorry. Everybody else could plainly see that covering the cost of meals during school holidays was the right thing to do. But the government's initial position clearly revealed their blind spot for disadvantaged children and poverty. It was disgraceful that it took such a groundswell of opinion to make them change course. And I welcome the U-turn, but it stuns me that it was even necessary. Poverty doesn't end when children break up for the holidays. In fact, the school holidays place additional pressure on already overstretched family finances. So in Warrington, we'd already put measures in place to support families via our early help team, along with support from schools, local businesses and community organisations. On the back of the U-turn, the government announced the winter grant scheme to support vulnerable families over the winter months, and the expansion of the holiday activity and food programme to support families during the school holidays this year. Now, we often hear about the disadvantage gap in terms of school attainment, but there's also a holiday experience gap for some of these children, meaning that they might lack exposure to some of the activities that their peers benefit from. Their nutrition and physical health might suffer, or they might experience social isolation during the school holidays. This experience gap is driven by deprivation, and the holiday activity and food grant aims to address these issues, allowing the council to fund holiday services for these children, such as enrichment activities, physical activities, food parcels, nutritional education, and mental health and wellbeing resources. Now, members are already familiar with the principle of a dynamic purchasing system, or DPS. This is a system the council can use to procure services from providers who join the DPS. Suppliers can join the DPS and bid for work provided in lots. It's a streamlined system open to joining at any time and ideally suited for small charity and community organisations. Once set up, suppliers can bid for lots without investing hours of additional time in form filling, and contracts can be added, issued and awarded faster than under other systems. This will allow the council to make a genuine positive difference in the lives of these children, investing in their futures in a way which will provide lifelong benefits. I would also like to add that this is not a new idea for Warrington. We've offered many of these services in the past, but here we have an opportunity to expand the scale and reach of them. There has never been a more essential time for this offer than as we are preparing to come out of another COVID lockdown. So the recommendation in point 11 is to authorise acceptance of the grant totalling over £700,000 this year, authorise use of the DPS, and delegate to the Director of Education, Early Help and SEND authority to award individual contracts under the DPS. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. I'm not sure if we've got any comments or questions from colleagues. Apparently I have now. They've just popped up in the chat. So, Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It just took me had a little issue sending my comment, but I commend this report, and I think I just wanted to echo really the work that we've done in the past to try and support families that are struggling in this way over the holidays, and to support children. You know, we have a strong record in working to support our children in this administration, from the very youngsters over the summer holidays right through to, you know, the commitment and the vision to develop the youth zone that is coming online now. But the youth zone will also help with some of these issues that we're talking about. But the holiday activities I'm very aware of from my work on the Welfare Reform Action Partnership, and it's something we've worked very hard over the years to try and find extra funding for. And at last now, only because the government has been shamed into this, are we getting some proper funding to start to expand this offer. So I'm very pleased to see it happening. We'll take the money whichever way it comes, and I really look forward to seeing this rolled out, because it's really important. And I'd just like to add that the work of the voluntary sector in supporting families through the COVID crisis and making sure that people did get enough to eat is another example of how, you know, how hard people are working to tackle a problem that really shouldn't be there. You know, everyone should be able to access decent food in this country in the 21st century.
Yeah, totally agree with you there, Councillor McLaughlin. I think it really comes to something when a 23-year-old millionaire footballer has to shame the government into taking the right course of action. I think that, you know, the government totally misread the mood of the public throughout last year on a number of levels, but, you know, never was it, I think, as illustrated as so strongly as over supporting vulnerable children accessing decent quality meals. You know, outside of school. And, you know, I think, you know, I join with you in commending all the efforts by all the organisations across our town. We've got a tremendous tradition here in Warrington of volunteering and supporting our community, and absolutely people stepped up to the mark to ensure that no child went hungry over that period. It's you know, a very tough topic area, and I'm really pleased to see that, you know, we're responding as a council, and certainly setting up this DPS will help to streamline support that we can offer to those families that are really struggling. If there are no other comments or questions, then we can move to asking for a seconder. I was going to move to the vote without a seconder there. Have I got a seconder for this report?
Happy to second it.
Okay, that's Councillor Mitchell. That's probably just because I mentioned a 23-year-old millionaire footballer. So no tribal loyalties from me after yesterday. I'm happy to acknowledge his role in that. Okay, so we can move to the vote. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie?
4.
Councillor Higgins?
4.
Councillor Jennings? 4. Councillor McLaughlin,
4.
Councillor Mitchell,
4.
Councillor Mundry,
4.
Councillor Patel,
4.
Councillor Smith.
Oh,
Thank you. My alphabet is working quite well tonight. From memory, I'm doing okay. Thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. On to item 11 then. The Forge car park extension and refurbishment update and award of construction contract. Councillor Mundry, please.
Yes, thank you, Russ. I think there's going to be a part 2 item, obviously, when we're going to award the contract in part 2. I think I'm really pleased to announce the improvements to Forge car park. It's something we did start looking at a long time ago. I think when we did the car parking charges reviews, we did commit, or I made a commitment that we'd as soon as possible we'd actually make improvements to the car park in the Forge car park in Stockton Heath. We really wanted to do this, and it took us some time to look at different schemes, and then identifying the funding. So we've had to find out it's nearly £750,000 it's going to cost us to do this. We're going to improve the car park system. I'm also going to extend the car park, because people may notice that the toilet blocks have already been demolished. We're going to expand the car park into that area, and it's something the council committed to some time ago, and it just took us some time to get the funding in place and get the schemes in place to make sure this can go forward. So with that going forward, I'm going to propose that we invest as a council almost £750,000 into improving the Forge car park and continue our commitment to the Stockton Heath area.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mundry. Have I got any comments or questions from colleagues? Doesn't look like it. Okay, I think recognition for the hard work that you've put in here, Councillor Mundry, in conjunction with officers. Obviously, this project has been some time in the making, and there's been a number of issues to get across. So, well done to you. I think I've actually got a question now, which is Councillor Mitchell. I'll save my comments until Councillor Mitchell has asked her question.
I'm just thinking, if my memory serves me correctly, the funding for this was in the budget that I dealt with last week. Is that right, Councillor Mundry?
Yes, you're quite right. It's a budget that we all agreed. I think, no, we didn't all agree. It actually, did we? No. Some people voted against it. Now, some people who want to see the Forge car park completed actually voted against the budget. So they voted against this work taking place, which is a bit strange, because I know some of the people on this have asked lots of questions about the Forge car park after the fact, because I think the questions have come after we've already committed to actually fund and try and get this scheme up and running. So you're quite right, it was in the budget. You're quite right, is that some people voted against the budget, so therefore voted against this scheme going forward. And it is the Labour administration has been pushing for this to happen. We did start some time ago to try and identify the funding for it. When we did get the funding, which is going to be from council borrowing, we put it in the budget, and then that budget was voted against by the very people who said they wanted to see it happen. So it is a bit strange the way things have materialised. But the officers have worked quite hard on it. We did quite some letters, a number of letters coming in from councillors asking them to do what they was already doing, which had the officers scratching their heads a little bit. Why are you sending me a letter in to ask me to look at funding to the car park when we're already doing it? So it's been a bit strange all the way around this. I think some have been trying to play politics with it.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Fancy that, eh? Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'll be a bit more specific than you, Councillor Mundry, because you're too polite. The two ward members involved voted against the budget on last Monday that would have implemented this very project through the capital programme, which seems rather strange. I mean, I think the other thing which strikes me is that the Forge car park hasn't deteriorated overnight. It's been like that for a number of years, and when they were in administration, they had the opportunity to address some of these issues and chose not to do so. And in fact, actually, I'm not sure what their record of delivery was across your portfolio at all, Councillor Mundry. So perhaps you can answer that for me.
Well, I can, because I have looked into this, Russ, as you may know. I think I've just released some papers about the Labour administration's improvements to highway schemes over the past from 2014-15 up to the present day, where we've invested over £100 million into major highway schemes. When we check the same record for when the Liberal and Conservative administrations in power, it delivered no major significant highway schemes in the borough of Warrington at all. So they didn't manage to actually implement any major highway schemes in their time in office, compared to our record, which I have had published, and members will be getting a copy of it soon, of our record of investment since we've been in control for the last 5 years. Doesn't go all the way back. It goes back to the last 5 years, where we've had over £100 million of highway investment, which we've managed to get a lot of external support with. So it hasn't actually cost the council all that amount of money. We've managed to get over 50% of external funding to contribute.
That's incredible. So thank you for that answer, and I look forward to receiving my copy of the report. I think one thing, hopefully, that's been illustrated tonight and over the last 10 years is, we do what we say we're going to do, and we deliver, on projects across the whole of the council services. So well done to you, and well done to officers for that. Have we got a seconder for this report?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Okay, that's Councillor Higgins. If we can move to the vote then, please, colleagues. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie,
4.
Councillor Higgins,
4.
Councillor Jennings, 4. Councillor McLaughlin,
4.
Councillor Mitchell,
4.
Councillor Mundry,
4.
Councillor Patel,
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Okay, thank you, that's unanimous. Agenda item 12 is contract modification, integrated public health services for children and young people 0 to 19 years. Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this paper is to seek approval from Cabinet for the modification of the current contract by extending it for an additional 2 years from 31st of March 2021 to the 31st of March 2023. The Health and Social Care Act sets out local authorities' statutory responsibility for delivering and commissioning public health services for children and young people aged 0 to 19. And within this, some areas are mandated, and you can see this in item point 3.1. I suppose some people will be surprised to know that it is the council that commissions our health visiting service and antenatal checks from 28 weeks pregnancy. So a lot of people won't realise that, and it's part of what happened when we took over public health. And these are included in this contract. So following a tender process, Warrington Borough Council awarded the integrated public health services for children and young people to Bridgewater Community Healthcare back in April 2016, and there was an option to extend the contract to March 2021. But with the coronavirus pandemic, it's constituted a major disruption for ongoing and future tender procedures of public procurements and contracts, because the focus coming out of COVID has to be on our young people. And to conduct a fully compliant tender process will take approximately 6 months, a further 6 months to implement it. And so you're looking at a lot of disruption when what we really need to be doing is focusing on our children and young people. Most providers of 0 to 19 services are NHS organisations that we commission, concentrating on restoring their core delivery over the next 6 to 12 months and delivering catch-up programmes. So for these reasons, it's recommended, and I'm recommending that we have a further extension of the current contract for an additional 2 years to ensure the ability to deliver the service in the way that will cause minimum disruption, and then for us to get the right procurement going forward, the right contract going forward. So the contract value was £3,407,901, and and we're looking at a similar contract value. It's expected to be similar with the extension. So this item is about getting the right support for children now as we begin to emerge from COVID, and it's about ensuring our services are focused in the right place, and when we do go for a full procurement, that we'll be in a really good position to get some good tenders in. So I move the recommendations on page 182.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor McLaughlin. I think the reasons for this proposed extension are pretty clear, and I think across the whole of the council services we've had to look at the impact of COVID and ensure that we can have continuity in service delivery, but also we don't compromise our ability to let contracts and get real sort of change and innovation in our service delivery going forward. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory. And I don't think I've got any comments or questions. Have we got a seconder for this report?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's Councillor Guthrie. In which case we can move to the vote. Councillor Bowden for, Councillor Guthrie
For,
Councillor Higgins
For,
Councillor Jennings for, Councillor McLaughlin
For,
Councillor Mitchell
For,
Councillor Mundry
For,
Councillor Patel
For,
and Councillor Smith.
For.
Thank you, colleagues, that's unanimous. That brings us to the end of our part 1 agenda for tonight. So if you've been watching tonight's Cabinet meeting online, then thank you very much and I hope you have a good evening. Can I move part 2, please?
agreed, Chair.
Okay, thank you.